Welcome to SAM Conversation, a program of South Asia Monitor. Today we will be discussing the book Blinkers Off on the theme, how will the world counter China? The book has been authored by Ms Gaurie Dwivedi, a journalist with over 15 years, 16 years experience, and who's written this. This is her first book, and it takes a refreshing look at the Sino-Indian relationship. To begin with, we have just completed 2 disengagements after, you can say, China's second aggression. If 1962 can be was known as that's what we called it, the Chinese aggression, then this, which happened last year in 2020, was the second aggression. It was an aggression. There should be no doubts about it. And it was an aggression with a view to gobbling up, a little more land. It was probably also timed with the Chinese Communist Party's great century, which was also, celebrated very recently. This is a country which has had a record of having land disputes, to put it mildly, with Nepal, Cambodia, Bhutan, Laos, Mongolia. It has swallowed all of Mongolia. Myanmar, Tibet is another country which it illegally occupied completely. And then there are disputes with Taiwan, Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Japan, South Korea, North Korea also, and Singapore and Brunei. They're a long list. And having received the first shock in its confrontation with the Indian Army in 1967 at Nathula, Sikkim, it, we can say, became bullet shy, having lost almost 400 people over a couple of weeks, a confrontation of a couple of more weeks. It lost almost 400 people, personnel, a whole convoy load of vehicles, and hundreds of bunkers. And after that, it became bullet shy. It pressed India to resolve all territorial issues by discussion and dialogue only. And ironically, it continued that bulletless state, so to speak. In 1975 at Kulungla in Arunachal, they killed 4 Assam Rifles personnel, not by bullets, but by torture. On 5 May and 9 May 2020, they made attacks with medieval barbaric weapons, rods and what have you, rods with nails, and but there were no fatal casualties. Then on June 15, 2020, when it killed 20 Indian Army personnel, including Colonel Babu commanding the 16 Bihar. After that, the personnel of 16 Bihar and the neighboring units got together and went to literally avenge their comrades who'd been killed and teach the Chinese a lesson once again. And that was that the Chinese learned, by howling and losing maybe up to about 100 soldiers. Some were killed by the Indian soldiers who went with bare hands. Then the third shock was when we occupied Kailash Range. Now we've had 2 disengagements. Not dwelling any further, I request Gaurie to maybe first start by telling us what motivated her to write this book, and we'll take it further from there. Over to you,
Namaskar, Colonel Bhat. Thank you so much for having me in this discussion, and thank you for taking us through what are really important aspects of why the world needs to wake up to the China challenge. You mentioned about the territorial disputes, you mentioned about the India-China disengagements in the last couple of months. Those are very important to set the stage for the discussion that we'll have today. But first up, what motivated me to write this book is I started with a single question in 2017, which was, how big is the China threat? After the Doklam clash, or at the peak of the Doklam issue, that's when I started with the question that how big is the China challenge? It started with first, how big is it for India? And then it carried forward to how big is it for the world? And as I began my research, I had also gone to China in 2019. And during those discussions and that research, I realized that it's not just about a particular area or a particular country that needs to now be bothered or worried about China. It is now a global threat, a global challenge, and therefore needs a global response. And that was the motivation behind starting my research. And the inflection point came with the pandemic, where there was a lot of concern about whether China did this on purpose or not, because that became another important aspect of delving into why is it that China would like to unleash something like this, if at all it did. And then, of course, that's when I realized that it's important to put this message out and start the larger conversation in academia, intellectuals, and important thinkers like yourself and the platform that you provide, how important it is to start the larger discussion about dealing with China.
Thank you, Gaurie. You have one of the important suggestions that you bring about in your book is to take a sort of a holistic 360 degrees, which, yes, could you explain that? Could you relate it to what we have done so far, and what maybe we need further to do?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you talk about the China threat, you need to, or the world needs to sort of understand that the backbone of the Chinese power is its economic muscle. That is really its spine and how it is being able to exercise the larger power it has and fulfill the geopolitical ambitions it has. Take, for instance, trade. How easily China has been able to weaponize trade. And there are multiple examples, and it's as if the book mentions those specific cases. It's as if the world chose to sleep, because it's not like for the first time that China told a country like Australia that if you take up the issue of independent inquiry in coronavirus origins, we will stop the trade related to your exports of wheat, barley, wine, and iron ore and others. It caused over $3.2 billion of damage to Australia. In the past also, there have been instances when the Nobel Committee gave its Nobel Peace Prize to a Chinese descendant, there was huge ramifications. 95% of Norway's salmon exports collapsed because China decided to use that as a mechanism to teach a lesson. In 2017, when South Korea decided to deploy the THAAD missile, there was backlash from China again. $850 million of South Korean businesses suffered in a period of 3 months. That's the kind of economic punishment China is used to giving to nations who do not toe the line. I think that's the single very important aspect of dealing with China. So if there are countries who decide that an economic response will come in to China, that can be a huge leveler, whether it is in terms of dealing with trade deals, whether it is in terms of dealing with creating FTAs with Taiwan, or whether any of such mechanisms are imposed. You know, you can impose a duty saying that products that come from Uyghurs will have a certain duty attached to it. 50% will be the duty imposed. So those are some of the suggestions that the book talks about, where it says trade is one aspect, technology is another aspect. You know, there are cyber attacks that are being talked about. 50 to 60% of cyber attacks that originate, that happen in India do have their origination related to China and Chinese entities. This is documented fact. It's not like that the train attack that happened in 2020 when the Mumbai metro or the Mumbai train stopped for a couple of hours. It was not the first time. There have been repeated such instances, the frequency of which can increase further, given that now China is an exposed country and faces global backlash. So technology is another aspect where countries need to come together to sort of respond to China and the threat it presents. And the third aspect of that is outer space. Again, an area where China is looking to slowly but surely weaponize outer space. And that is an area where nations can come together, create rules, create groundwork to ensure that China is not able to do so. So essentially, the book presents, that's why 360 degrees, I'm glad you mentioned that, is because it says that take a non-military approach as well. Military is an aspect where there are only losers. There are no gainers in a military aspect of engagement. Non-military aspects of engaging and ensuring that China, powerful deterrence is created against China, could be a more holistic and long-term solution.
Thank you, Gaurie. Yes, you made a few points. I think it's very important for the country, India, everyone to be aware of the fact that we are in a state of war. There are two nations who are in a state of war with us. China, the much larger one, and Pakistan, much smaller one. But, you know, Pakistan, ever since it realized that it cannot get the better of us in any conventional war, it went in for the war by exporting terrorism, you know, asymmetric warfare. But what we need to know and keep in mind all the time about China is that this is the Chinese Communist Party is a very, very, to put it very mildly, unreasonable in any aspect of dealing. Liars, they lie through their teeth. They are they're deceived. They'll promise something, do something else. They'll renege on promises. Now just imagine and also they are, and ever since they realize that they cannot get the better of Indian troops in a conventional armed fight with rifles, machine guns, and artillery. They are trying any which way, some of which you mentioned. Can you imagine that as early as in 2015, their scientists had discussed what the effect of weaponizing the COVID or the SARS would be, SARS. And exactly what has happened is what they discussed. How it can throw a country's, complete medical system out of gear. How it can, impact on so many aspects of life of a country. And well, as far as India is concerned, there's a further frustration that after doing all that, India's recovery has been quite surprisingly quite good, considering our size, considering the kind of we're not a very systematic kind of a country. Chaos is part of our life for decades. So it's not easy, and yet I think we've fared very well. And they're not stopping. What else in your book can you elaborate a little more on that relates to the present?
Yes, in fact, one of the significant aspects of the book is where it talks about the parallel or the alternate nexus of power that China is looking to create. The book predates the developments in Afghanistan, but they almost seem prophetic because Blinkershoff says that China's ultimate aim is to create an alternate axis of power to upend the present world order. And that nexus goes from China, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Russia, and also includes maybe Turkey on an issue-based or an issue-specific consensus. And that we are unfortunately seeing unfold before us. And the bigger challenge is that the First World Order led by America seems very vulnerable right now because of the dispensation right now in Washington and how the entire Afghanistan issue was handled or mishandled. And the repercussions of this will be felt globally, most of course by India in terms of the terror backlash that is likely to happen and the larger ramifications in both Europe and Asia. The moment this nexus, which has both Russia and China, both having their internal compulsions of competing with each other, you leave aside that for a minute, but Russia plus China, the chapter in fact is called Power of Compounding. And that's exactly what's happening. If Russia and China do find a common minimum ground when it comes to how to exploit the Afghanistan issue, the challenge gets amplified because A, you have a weak dispensation in America, B, you have next to zero transatlantic cooperation because EU frankly doesn't exist, and all that is then left is the Quad countries, primarily Japan, Australia, India, which may not be very easily suited to handle the situation that may be coming out of Afghanistan because it has ramifications spreading from Europe on one end to Africa on the other. So those challenges is what the world is now going to face, more so because now China stands exposed. China is no more that benign world power, which is chasing trade, which is a beneficiary of globalization.
Sorry, it never was. It never was, pardon me, it never was a benign.
True. But that facade has also been taken away. That facade is now over, and now it doesn't need to pretend anymore, and that makes the challenge that much more complicated. I wouldn't use the word tough because there are levers that the world can use against China, but complicated is what it's now turning out to be, more so because BRI has led to vassal states. You have Pakistan, which is a vassal state. You're going to see Afghanistan, where China is going to try and use the same BRI matrix, the same mechanisms of throwing in money and getting complete compliance. The fact that it's a failed state is obviously going to add further to China's advantage. But those aspects of the present flux in this region is going to complicate matters, but at some level could also bring in global leadership. Who knows? Biden may find that spine to take on China because of the mess that Afghanistan finds itself in, primarily due to Washington and Pentagon's policies. So I'm hopeful that some of this could lead to that global push to address the China challenge, because it's now or never. Colonel Bhatt, we like it or not, China is still a country that's growing. And as it grows and it takes on America, and as it continues to become powerful, the next 4-5 years is all that the world has to address and deal with it. It's now or never, and maybe, I'm hopeful, Afghanistan could provide that push.
Well, as they say in Hindi, aapke muh mein ghee shakkar ho, if that turns out to be true.
True.
But remember, after the Second World War, there were trials at Nuremberg where German commanders whose crimes against the, killing or massacre of Jews had been proved, were given appropriate punishment. Based on the discussion of your book, we gave the subject title, How Will the World Counter China?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the ways that the world must counter China is to catch it for COVID-19. When Mr. Xi Jinping invited Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Wuhan, did the world know that there's a laboratory there called Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is one of the laboratories where biological warfare experiments are being conducted. And well, the convenient thing to say is, one of them went Ori. And this, virus which is isolated from bats was leaked. I refused to take that. I finished my book. I thought I finished my book on China, which took off from 1967, in December 2019. The moment I was about to send it to the publisher, came this news about COVID-19. I said, I'm sure this is not COVID-19. I mean, it may be call it anything, but this is a result of China's experimentation of biological weapons. And it's too good to believe that it's, an inadvertent accident, because it suits it goes with the psyche of the Chinese Communist Party. Want global domination. You want global domination, you want to achieve that. This is one of the ways. Sort the world out. Anyway, and my estimation was then that if this is what they've done now, then the line of actual control between China and us, or rather, Tibet, China occupied Tibet and India, is bound to become active again. And sure enough, it did. So my book now stands added with 2 chapters, the last of which I've just completed. Because it's only in August that the second disengagement happened.
Right.
And I thought, let's see. And even that disengagement is incomplete, both the disengagements are incomplete. The second one particularly so. And I think it's time that if the world has to sort China out, it must unitedly, corner it on this COVID-19, because the China's virology story doesn't stop there. It's cooperating with Pakistan on the same. If they've cooperated with Pakistan on nuclear weapons, then it's cooperating with Pakistan again on virology.
Yes.
So, anything you have to comment, please?
In fact, one of the chapters in the book, the last one, in fact, goes on to say that what if another virus comes out of China? And what if this is a precursor to what China is really preparing for in the future? And biological warfare, Colonel Bhat, as you rightly said, has no boundaries, has no regard for any of the military deterrents that the world has created. All our piles of nuclear weapons and everything.
But sorry, there, if China had an answer, it probably has a vaccine which was used very effectively in Beijing and Shanghai. Because in these two places, the effect of COVID-19 was, compared to the rest of China, nil, comparatively nil, or very little.
Yes. No, that's correct. That as far as biological warfare is concerned, China has been experimenting with it for the last 10 odd years. It took some scientists from Canada. Some of the Chinese origin scientists in Canada came back. They came back in suspicious conditions. Sort of a lot of important material was missing from those Canadian labs. And then comes out this virus inadvertently. So what lies ahead in the future, no one knows. And what China may do in the future when it is exposed more, when it is facing backlash, when it is isolated, could be probably resorting once again to biological warfare at an even bigger scale. And that is something that the world needs to be prepared for. The preparation for anything has to come in by building deterrence. You can't wish a country away, more so when it is the size of China. What you can do is create deterrence, build deterrence in the field of military and non-military. Even in the field of military, we continue maritime domain. You would be knowing, Colonel Bhat, even better, so, due to your vast experience. The fact is that countries still are not able to accept or identify the kind of maritime challenges that China poses. Its Coast Guard is a militia in itself. And there is no response from any country because they don't know how far to go, because it's a Coast Guard. It is not supposed to have the kind of activities and the law that the Chinese Coast Guard has. But militarizing of civilian police wings in the maritime domain is what China presents to the world. And response to that is going to have an impact on Taiwan, Senkaku, Spratly, you name it. Because this is where incremental acquisition of land continues by China. So at the end of the day, deterrence is all that needs to be created, and how we create it collectively in all these fields is really going to decide how the world counters China. There is no other way. We can't wish a country like China away. We need to build deterrence. The stronger the deterrence, the less likelihood of Xi Jinping or any of his successors to resort or to fall to the temptation of trying to usurp more land or change status quo.
India's reactions last year, the military ones, of course, we've touched on them. We gave them two rude shocks. one on 15th, 16th of June, and the other on the night of 29th, 30th August. But there was a very, very palpable public reaction. I recall during Rakhi, the festival of Rakhi, the chant of all our shopkeepers was, "ये चाइना की नहीं है, हमने चाइना से मंगवानी बंद कर दी है, हम चाइना से नहीं मंगवाएंगे." You refer to Rakis, which is just one item. And then there were shopkeepers talking about other items. ये भी नहीं मंगवाएंगे, वो भी नहीं मंगवाएंगे. There was I will not comment on what all steps the government has taken or should take. There are further steps that can be taken, should be taken, but I won't comment on those. But militarily, it is very necessary for us to be very, very well prepared. Make good all our deficiencies, which had really piled up in the, you can say, decade or more of, I'm not a political person, but it simply, as an analyst, has to be said that during that UPA 1 and UPA 2 period, the condition of India's armed forces, as far as acquisitions, refits, was pathetic. So there shouldn't be any doubt about it. Much headway has been made, and Indian industry is now, far more involved, has been given opportunities, has been, to make materials which are required for weapon systems or other military equipment. That's just one of them. But do you have any further book planned, or have you been following up this book with more articles on India-China relations?
Yes, indeed, I have been doing that, Colonel, but especially since the situation now is so fluid. We've had the Quad meeting recently. We've had a change of dispensation in the US. Now you have the Biden administration, how they are going to approach the China issue, how they are going to approach the Indo-China issue. Has a certain overhang on how we sort of deal with the entire issue. So all those aspects is what I have been writing on. And my sense is that the next couple of years, I'm very happy that there is a lot of literature that's coming out as far as China is concerned. There was a glut of literature only on Pakistan. We spent the longest time in not focusing on our biggest security challenge, which is China. So I'm glad that there's more literature coming out on China. And in the next couple of years, it will be very important for the dispensation sitting in North Block and South Block to make good of some of these aspects that these writings and books and all these present in terms of ideas of how to deal with China. More importantly, deal with China holistically. When you mentioned even military, deal with all aspects. When you talk about deterrence, military, make sure that the acquisition problem, the weapons upgrade problem is also addressed. Make sure the technology transfer issue is also addressed. And at the same time, non-military aspects are also equally prioritized. Even aspects like how do we deal with our neighborhood? We've all sit and sulk how Sri Lanka suddenly turned into China champions. But how do we wean our neighbors back from the lap that they are sitting right now in China's lap? Wean them back. This is our geostrategic orbit, whether it is Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, the IOR littorals, Seychelles, Maldives, Mauritius. We need to wean them all back. How do we do that? whether it is economically, militarily, socially, culturally, combination of all those aspects, we need to devise a strategy and a roadmap for that. And I'm hopeful that some of these aspects is where the government needs to focus on and prioritize in the next couple of years.
Thank you, Gaurie. I think you put out some very pertinent, very significant points. And having written a book, this is one subject which I think I've always said that many more in India should be writing, should be studying China.
Yes.
Because there are many, China studied India in so many ways for so long.
Yes. Exactly. Yes. Absolutely.
There are I don't know how many thousand words of Sanskrit in there.
Yes. We need to have more Mandarin scholars as well, Mandarin speaking experts to know what China is
they've studied every aspect of ours.
Absolutely.
And I think in all our think tanks, schools, one thing is that, one failing of ours so far is that history has not been taught.
Yes.
Very important pre-independence and post-independence actual history has not yet been taught.
Yes.
And I hope now that it's being put together, it is put together without any political considerations. I hope so. But it is very necessary for us to, these are enemies too. There are two enemy states. I'm not mincing my words. China,
yes,
and Pakistan.
Yes.
And the thick as thieves. Well, I don't know who will rob who, because very soon, China has got its big paw out there in Pakistan, and it remains to be seen what Pakistan's future will be.
Yes.
And we must study them. We must
Absolutely.
study them from every angle.
The strategic clarity has taken us a very long time to reach where we need to study China in greater detail. But derai durustai, it's good that we now have a focus on China.
It's high time.
Yes.
Thank you, Gaurie. I think it was a good. We went over a lot, and thank you. All the best to you.
Thank you so much, Colonel Bhat. Thank you so much for your time.